Hello! Last time I went over the first part of how I prepare for NaNoWriMo, all about plotting. And today we're going to chat about Scrivener. I love Scrivener. I call myself a Scrivener evangelist because I love to spread the Scrivener joy. It dramatically changed my writing life for the better, and now I use it to write all of my novels. I also do some workshops on Scrivener too, so that's one thing I've done a few times in the past when we're actually able to meet in person. A lot of people can find Scrivener super overwhelming, and I totally get that. There are lots of options and features, and I've had people tell me occasionally that the first time they opened it, they had to immediately shut it down because it was just brain overload. Totally fair reaction. There's a lot of different features. One of the great things about Scrivener is that it has all these different features so that you can customize it specifically to how your brain works and how works best for your process. So you don't have to use all of the features. That's one of the dirty little secrets of Scrivener, I guess, apparently, is that you don't have to use all the features. I have lots of people tell me, oh, I don't use it well enough, or I don't think I get the most out of it. If it works for your writing process, totally okay. Occasionally try something else to liven it up and try something new, but if it works for you, that's okay. But I'm going to tell you some fun features and how I prepare for NaNoWriMo by using Scrivener. And then I'm also going to have a few Scrivener tips probably almost every week throughout the next month, throughout November, and possibly part of December as well. So I have lots of fun tips. Now when I teach Scrivener workshops, I always try to approach it by focusing on the practical application of each feature. And I think that really helps, and the feedback I've received seems to make it seem like it helps with that information overload and how you can actually use these features to help your writing. So today I'm going to show you how I get ready for NaNoWriMo by setting up my Scrivener file. So the first thing you need to know about Scrivener is that there are 3 different versions, as if it wasn't complicated enough. There's a Mac version, a PC version, and an iOS version. The Mac version of Scrivener has been around considerably longer than the PC version, so it has more options, bells and whistles, that kind of a thing. I use a PC, so if you're on a Mac, or if you're using the iOS version for Apple, iPad, or iPhone, you should have the same essential features, but the way you access them may be a little bit different. To further confuse things, there's also Scrivener 2 and Scrivener 3. Scrivener 3 is now available for Mac, but some of you might be using Scrivener 2 for Mac if you haven't upgraded. Windows is currently on Scrivener 2. So Scrivener 3 will have more features and a slightly different interface, but just a little bit. So the essential features and how you use it should be more or less in a similar type of a thing. At each feature, I'm also going to, that I go over today, I'm going to include a link where you can find a walkthrough on YouTube from Literature and Latte. They're the company that makes Scrivener. That way, so you're not missing out if you have a Mac just because I'm using a PC. So we'll still provide that resource for you guys. So, that out of the way, the first thing you need to do if you're going to set up your NaNoWriMo project is to create a new project. So what I do, I'm going to create a whole new one here, and then we'll go over this all together, is you select a template. That's the first thing you got to do. They have a bunch of different templates and some tutorials here, which can be super helpful. I always go for fiction, because that's what I tend to write. And going to find a place to save it, enter a name, Nano 2020 here, and click Create Your Project. This will open a brand new project. I'm just going to close this old one here, get that out of the way. And, sorry, that's taking longer than I thought. There we go, here we go. So we have this new project, and initially it always brings up this little help file here, this in each of every fiction one. And you can look through this if you like. I'm not going to go through that in any detail. You can do that on your own time if you would like. I usually just kind of move it into trash, but you may find it helpful to look at. And then I go to the manuscript part here. So once you have this, we're going to talk about the basics first things first, and then we'll talk about some fun features. So if you haven't closed your Scrivener program yet, hopefully not, it's a robust program. It's a very robust program, and it can be a lot to take in at first. I know a lot of people who can find it really overwhelming, and that's okay. It's understandable. It's a lot to take in. So I'm going to show you around. It has 3 interconnected interfaces. This right here is the Corkboard. A little icon up here shows the Corkboard. There's also the manuscript, which is right here with the pages, and the outliner. And that's over here with a little outline. So starting with the Corkboard, this is set up essentially as virtual note cards. They can be dragged around and dropped into place. And I'm going to show you here, we have a chapter thing here. I'm going to add another scene by using this little green button. Go scene 2, add another one so you can see how they drag and drop. And then go back up here. And you can see in the corkboard you have these 3 scenes now. But you can drag these anywhere you want. Move around. There's also really cool things you can do with this, which we'll get into more detail in another walkthrough. You can add color coding. You can stamp them with things like first draft and have other ways of tracking things using the corkboard, which is pretty cool. I personally don't use the corkboard a lot. I know a lot of people love it, especially friends of mine who are pantsers have said they found this very useful and helpful for them. It can also be very helpful for people who are more like a visual learner, and people who move scenes around a lot when writing. That can be a really useful tool for you guys. For me, for my brain, it doesn't quite work. I think it's really fun to look at and play around with, but I tend to find it a little bit more distracting than useful, whereas other people have a very different experience. So something you can use, it's cool. The next fun thing to look at, the part that I actually use a lot more, is the outliner, and that is right here. So I'm going to put this here. There we go. So the outliner, this is essentially shows the outline of your manuscript. It's connected to the corkboard. So anything you add on the corkboard or in the manuscript, which we'll get to in a second, automatically pulls into this part of the feature. If you add a synopsis, you can do that here. Mary had a little lamb. There we go. That shows up here. It'll show up in the note cards on the manuscript thing, which I'll show you in a minute. And it'll also show up on the corkboard. Hey, there you go. You can add labels to this thing, statuses, and a whole bunch of other fun things here. You can track cool things. What I like to do when I'm setting this up, because I am very much a plotter, is I like to add columns for a very specific reason. You can go to View and Outliner columns to see what these various options are. By default, there's usually the title, synopsis, label, and the status. What I like to do is add word count. I also like to add include and compile. I'll tell you why in a second. And target, and one more, progress. So here's why I like to have these things. So for word count, this gives you what the current word count is in your chapter or your scene. Right now it's all 0 because I haven't written anything yet. But you can also set this as a target. So if you say you want to have this scene be 500 words, you can do that. Right now your progress is at 0. However, as you write this particular scene here, this progress bar will start to fill up. So you can see how much of this chapter you've completed, which scene you've completed, and what still needs to be done. And that's kind of like a snapshot view of your whole book. Because as you add little scenes here throughout your whole book, this all automatically populates. So I find that very helpful when I'm starting out at the beginning of the day and I want to see what do I need to write today. I can go to this and I can say, oh, I have written all of this scene here. I'm going to actually call this scene 1, and scene 2, and then scene 3. Oops, that was wrong key there. And scene 3, and I can say, okay, I've written all of scene 1, but I need to write scene 2 and scene 3. I know how far along I am in each of those, and I know what I need to do for the day, and where there's gaps in my manuscript still, instead of having to kind of scroll through and figure out where those gaps are. The other thing I like here is this include and compile. This I'll show you a little bit more about later, but once you have finished writing your manuscript in Scrivener at the end of November, you're going to want to export it to a Word document. And you can do that by making sure that this is checked. So anything, if you have any notes or anything that you wouldn't want to include in the compile, you just uncheck this box and they won't be there. One thing that can be very helpful though is if you need to uncheck things, or for various reasons, there's a lot of different reasons you might need to do that, which I'll tell about in another walkthrough later on. If you need to uncheck these for any reason, it's a lot more efficient to go to your outliner and just go boom, 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 uncheck them off like this, than it is to go to the manuscript interface and kind of go through each individual one and pick them out. It's a little faster. So I like having these things here. I find these useful. But check out the View Outliner columns if you're a plotter or find this interesting, and see what might be fun to play around with and have in your little view here. Now, the most important part of Scrivener is the manuscript. This is where you're going to spend most of your time. What it does is it will, this actually has some interface-ish things too. You have what's called a binder over here on the left. This is what basically, you think of it like an actual physical binder. This is what shows all the stuff you've got in Scrivener. Right here on the manuscript part, this is where you're going to be writing, spending your time writing. But you can have characters, and there's template sheets down here, like a character sketch you can put under here. Let me drag and drop it. Now it lives there. Move the setting sketch up to places. Show you what those look like. So you can have one of these for each of your characters. Something similar with a setting. These are already in here for you. If you end up doing an ebook, there's some other options here. I'm not going to go over that right now. That's more for compile. But if you have research, you can add research in here. You can pull in web pages and media and all sorts of fun things into research if you have a research-heavy kind of novel. And your trash. So if you throw something out, you can always dig through your trash until you delete it. But you're going to spend most of your time here. And this is the binder. There's also another sidebar that's right here with this eye. It's called the inspector. And this is actually my favorite part. Annie on Instagram asked me what feature of Scrivener I can't live without, and this is it, the inspector. It may not look that exciting at first, but it is in fact chock full of awesome tools. I'm going to share more specific tips on using these tools later in a different walkthrough video, because there's a lot of things you could do. But for now, I'm just going to tell you about my favorite one, which is the notes. I'll show you this here. These are two different types of notes. You have document notes, which, actually let me go on a scene because that'll work a little better. On a scene, there's document notes. So if I put, for example, notes right here in document notes, and then I click on that to bring up project notes. You can also have multiple project notes if you need to go through them. I usually have one for my first draft, then I have project notes for a revision, project notes with any agent feedback, and then editorial feedback. So I have a whole slew of project notes by the time I'm done, usually on any book. But for right now, we're just going to go our main one. Then I can put in notes. Keep X in mind while you write. So, X, Y, Z. That's more fun. So now when I'm here, I go on scene 1 here, then I go to scene 2. Those project notes stay right there in my line of vision all the time. And however, if I go to document notes and I go to scene 2, those notes are gone. So those document notes are specific for each little file. Each of these are called a scrivening, hence the name Scrivener. It's a little scrivening is what these are called. And so your project notes are always there in your line of sight, and as you toggle them on or off with the document notes, and the documents are specific. I find these super helpful because it really helps to keep me on track. Because if I have a theme or a specific revision note that I need to be mindful of, or something I'm trying to weave in or not be forgetful of, then I can put that there. It's always in my line of vision. And I find that very helpful. It keeps me on track and helps me not to forget and get too distracted by my characters and their antics. So that's my all-time favorite features. So that's the setup of the little mini tour of Scrivener and how it's put together. So let's see here. Okay, so when you're in the manuscript view, the options are pretty similar to your basic Word document. You can choose a font up here, choose any font you want. You can choose size of the font, spacing, all that stuff. So that's pretty basic if you've used a Word document before. But one thing you might want to do is customize your view and set your preferences. So to set your preferences, you go to Tools, Options, and this will bring up a whole bunch of options. We'll go over these briefly. You don't necessarily even need to look at all of these, but you may want to if there's certain things you want to do. And I'll show you some that are helpful. In general, these are pretty basic. One thing you should definitely do is under saving. Save after period of inactivity. I usually set it for, make sure it's set for at least for no more than 2 seconds. This is one of the great things about Scrivener is, generally speaking, and there are always exceptions, it's really good at automatically saving your work. I personally have not found it to crash very often. I know certain people have had other issues. It could depend on your setup or various things or whatever, random installation you happen to have of it. There could be a random bug, who knows. But I personally have had it be pretty stable. And even when it's spontaneously closed, which is really rare, I haven't lost work because it has saved that work in every 2 seconds, which is great. It's not like Word, where if you don't save and you forget and close it, you lose it. I did that the other day and it was so frustrating. But not with Scrivener, it's great. So definitely make sure that is saved at a low amount. Then you can go to Appearance. This is where you can set things like colors and fonts and stuff like that. So that's always very helpful to do that as well, to set those things up. Here we go. Corkboard. You can change how your corkboard looks if you'd like to do that. Your navigation, things like that. The editor. I know some people may have had this set up. Yours may look different. Yours might be set up to Courier. If you want to change your default text when you have a new thing, this is what you do, is you go to the editor and you change it to Times New Roman or whatever your preferred font happens to be, and hit OK, and make sure you hit Apply, and that will change your font. So every time you open a new Scrivener file, these should be the defaults, which is helpful because I think the default on many on this, at least in the past, has been Courier, which is like annoying to look at. So that's another thing you can do there. I find that's what I always do, is make sure that that's on Times New Roman. Let's see, some other things you can do as far as spelling, any auto capitalization or word completion, smart quotes, etc. Things you might want to do. Not going to worry about these too much right now. So that's your basic things. There's lots of other things you can look at. There's a whole ton of options, but those are your basic things. Is really, you want to make sure your font is your preferred font, so that your eyes don't feel like they're going to bleed from looking at Courier forever. So once you're done with that, click OK. And then you can customize your view. So you may notice that my toolbar looks a little different from yours, most likely. I have already customized this. This is the default settings for me with the toolbar, but you can customize them as well. To do that, go to Tools and Customize Toolbars. And this is where you can pull a whole bunch of different things over for you. There's the Format toolbar, which is this one right here, and the Main toolbar, which is the top one right here. And you can put in little separators, have different, that's these little things here in the PC anyway, and basically put whatever you want in this toolbar from these various options here. For me, these are the ones that I have found the most useful. You've got to have the Add an Item. That's always important. Easy way to delete the trash item. I do a lot of work with keywords, and I write in full screen pretty often, so those are pretty key for me to have. The compile button, that's important to have handy anytime you need to export to a Word document. And I also like to use project targets pretty frequently as a motivator and to track my progress toward my writing goal for the day. So those are the ones that for me are what I like to make sure is up there, because it's fun to have those always in my line of sight and make things easier for me. Your mileage may vary, so pick whatever you like and just drag and drop them basically. And then hit Apply and OK, and then you're done. So this is how I like to set things up, essentially. I will have my little manuscript thing over here. What I always do also, it defaults to having these chapter folders. I personally do not like the folders. Your mileage may vary, which is totally fine. So what I usually do is actually move these by dragging and dropping out of the folder and then just delete the folder altogether. Because I personally don't find that helpful. You may find it helpful. You may find it more helpful to have a collection of scenes in the chapter and do it that way, and that's totally fine. I usually then change it to chapter 1, chapter 2, etc. Here. That's what I like to do. if I'm writing off a beat sheet and I haven't figured out the chapters or scenes yet, I may actually just put beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and write like that until I get far enough along that I've kind of got a feel for where those chapters are going to fall. Over here, if you put in a little synopsis, you can now put in Mary had a little lamb here. This, again, will also pull into your outliner and your corkboard, and you can have a little reminder of what this chapter is supposed to be about as you're writing. So that's how I like to set my template up when I'm preparing for NaNoWriMo or to write any book, really. This is what works for my brain. You can set yours up and whatever you think works best for you. I hope you found something interesting in a little chat. So that's it for today, but next week I'll be back with a pretty cool Scrivener tip for those of you who may have already started writing before November 1st. Because I know a lot of people do that. I'm certainly very guilty of that. And you want an easy, quick, simple, easy way to bring that into your Scrivener file and differentiate it from your other words. So stay tuned for that next week. And thanks for watching, and happy writing.